For several hours on Thursday evening, Parliament sat and eventually passed the budget for the next financial year. Government will have to look for 72.13 trillion shillings, much higher than the initial estimates of 52.73 trillion shillings. The revision came through a corrigendum to the budget issued just hours before it was passed.
5. Project support, that's grants and loans. Government expects to get 9,583.46 billion. And the grant total is 72 trillion 136.006 billion.
The budget was passed without long debate and scrutiny of the appropriations to the different sectors.
Now passing a budget on behalf of the people of Uganda, an addition of 14 trillion by ambush. We are passing this budget by ambush. We have not scrutinized it.
Shadow Finance Minister Ibrahim Ssemujju Nganda presented a minority report in which he showed that a huge amount of the budget allocation is going into servicing debts, which this leaves a vacuum in finances that will be available to run other government projects and deliver on services.
The biggest task on our hands as the 11th Parliament is to significantly reduce the country's 97.499 trillion public debt. This debt has become a big burden to our economy and threatens the very existence of Uganda as a sovereign state. Public debt now stands at 52.7% of our 184 trillion GDP. Parliament must therefore reject any measure that seeks to grow the public debt.
In his report, Ssemujju Nganda says that the burden of a huge public administration needs to be reconsidered because what it stands at now will result in a wage burden of over 8 trillion shillings in the next financial year.
7.5 trillion, representing 12% of the total budget. The wage bill is the second item in the budget to take a lot of money after debt servicing. There is an increment, I think, of UPDF, which will now bring it to 8-point-something trillion. This wage bill should be calculated against the total sums of money that remains after debt servicing.
He has urged the government to look into trimming spending on luxuries and a reduction in borrowing. Butambala County MP Muhammad Mwanga Chivombi agrees that the budget is short of discretionary expenses which will affect service delivery.
The Electoral Commission, in its 2-year strategic plan, wants 2.3 trillion for preparing and conducting the next 2026 general elections. Elections alone will cost Uganda 1.3 trillion. That's why in the corrigenda they are adding Electoral Commission more than 400 billion. These elected leaders, according to Electoral Commission, will in the next election grow to 3.3 million. That's the total number of leaders Uganda will have.
I'd like to beg the Minister of Finance to tell me how a figure of 19 trillion as a rollover now goes down to reduce to 12. Because right, Honorable Speaker, for the first time, for as long as I've been here, it is the first time I've encountered a budget report that does not establish a discretionary budget.
Because we are now looking at two sides of this budget, the revenue and expenditure side. Our biggest concern would be if the revenue side was not balancing with the expenditure side. There we would have issues.
Chivombi blamed the parliament for passing the budget without debating it, as many of the appropriations were passed without scrutiny.
But what happens to this institution where I sit in with titles, honorable colleagues, is that we passed a budget without this debate, without you knowing these issues, without even some MP knowing the full implication.
We will continue to upgrade health centers 3 to 4s, expand and rehabilitate secondary schools and primary schools, provide money for regional referral hospitals. There are major road construction which has been provided there.
In Ssemujju's report, he says government has borrowed money and is not utilizing it, yet it continues to pay commitment fees. The Ministry of Finance report on public debt for March 2023 put total undisbursed loans at $4.81 billion, which is about 18.7 trillion shillings. Juma Kiria, NTV.